Stop eating for a while, and inside your cells a recycling crew switches on. It pulls apart their own broken machinery and rebuilds usable parts from the scraps. Not a metaphor, a measurable program written into the cell that runs harder when food stops arriving. The Greek name for it is autophagy. It means self-eating, and that sounds alarming until the mechanism is laid out. A cell is not a sealed bag of fluid. It is a crowded factory packed with proteins, membranes, and small organs that wear out. Mitochondria leak. Proteins misfold and clump. Left alone, that debris accumulates, and the factory runs dirtier each year. Autophagy is the cleanup shift that keeps the floor clear. Here is the part most descriptions skip. When you are eating and energy is abundant, the cell has no reason to scavenge. It builds, it grows, it stores. The cleanup crew stays mostly idle. When the supply line goes quiet, the cell reads that quiet as a signal, and the balance tips toward breaking things down rather than building them up. So the trigger for repair is not a supplement, not a special food, not effort. It is partly the absence of food. A pause, a stretch of hours where nothing new comes in, and the cell turns its attention inward to the mess it has been carrying. Which raises the obvious question: what does that crew take apart, and what tells it when to begin? Picture the cleanup as a physical act, because that is what it is. A flat sheet of membrane appears inside the cell, curves, and wraps itself around a target. A clump of damaged protein, a burned-out mitochondrion. The sheet closes into a sealed pouch called an autophagosome, with the garbage now sitting inside it. That pouch then drifts to a lysosome, the cell's acid stomach, packed with enzymes. The two fuse. The enzymes flood in and dismantle the contents down to raw building blocks. Amino acids, fatty acids. Pieces small enough to be shipped back out and used again. Nothing is thrown away. The broken machine becomes the parts list for the next one. When the target is specifically a worn-out mitochondrion, the process has its own name, mitophagy. That matters more than it sounds. Mitochondria are the power plants. When they fail and are not cleared, they leak, and a cell full of leaking power plants is a cell under stress. Clearing the dead ones is quality control at the level that powers everything else. The man who first mapped this core machinery was Yoshinori Ohsumi, working in yeast. In 2016, that work earned the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Basic biology, observed in a single-celled organism, and the same fundamental wiring runs through human cells too. Now the control switch, because this is where the food connection lives. The cell runs two sensors. The first is called mTOR. Think of it as the abundance detector. When food, and especially protein, is plentiful, mTOR is active and gives one order: build, grow, and it presses down on autophagy, holding the cleanup crew back. The second sensor is AMPK, the energy shortage detector. When fuel runs low, AMPK rises, mTOR settles down, the brake comes off the recycling program, and the crew gets to work. Accent color, #FFB100. So the repair system is not switched on by adding something. It is released when the building signal goes quiet. Hold that inversion, because it reframes the whole topic. The cleanup is not a thing you buy. It is a thing that happens when the cell stops being told to build. And that points to a mismatch between the cell and the modern day. For most of human history, food was not constant. Eating happened in windows. Hours, sometimes longer, passed with nothing coming in. The abundance detector spent real time switched low, and the cleanup crew spent real time switched on. The two states alternated, the way day alternates with night. Modern eating looks nothing like that. A typical day now opens with breakfast and runs until close to midnight, with coffee, snacks, and drinks threaded through the gap. The supply line almost never goes quiet. From the cell's point of view, mTOR stays leaning toward build, and the window where autophagy ramps up barely opens. This is not a point about willpower. The machinery for inward cleanup is intact in every one of your cells. What has changed is how rarely the conditions that release it ever appear. The hardware is fine. The off switch for building almost never gets pressed. And here the honesty has to be loud, because this topic has been badly oversold. You have probably seen a confident number: 16 hours of fasting equals peak autophagy. That clean figure is not established in humans. Most of the precise timing data comes from yeast and from mice, animals with faster metabolisms and far shorter lives. Direct measurement of autophagy inside living human tissue, hour by hour, is difficult and sparse. The honest statement is narrow. A genuine pause from food shifts the cell toward cleanup. The direction is real. The exact hour the human switch flips is not pinned down. Now the older audience, because after 50, the stakes stop being abstract. Autophagy does not hold steady across a lifetime. As the years pass, the cleanup crew slows down. The same volume of cellular garbage gets cleared less efficiently than it did at 30, so it accumulates faster. Look at where that debris collects, and the picture sharpens. Clumped, misfolded proteins are a feature of aging tissue, and they appear prominently in the aging brain. Researchers studying neurodegeneration keep returning to the same theme. Cells that cannot clear their own waste are cells in trouble. That link should be stated as an association, not as a settled chain of cause and effect. But it is consistent enough to take seriously. So two things move in the same wrong direction with age. The cleanup machinery weakens on its own, and the modern eating pattern keeps the building signal switched on almost continuously, which is exactly the condition that holds the cleanup crew back. A slowing system asked to work even less. That combination is the quiet stake here. Not one dramatic event, but a gradual loss of internal housekeeping in the decades when the body can least afford to skip it. So what follows, stated carefully, because this is the part people misuse. The takeaway is not a heroic fast, it is the recovery of pauses that used to be ordinary. Start with the night. Eating late, close to sleep, keeps the building signal lit through the hours when the body would otherwise have its longest natural fast. Moving the last meal earlier and not eating through the night lengthens that quiet stretch without any special effort. For many people, that single change is the largest available shift toward more cleanup time. Next, the gaps between meals. Constant grazing, a snack every hour, keeps the supply line full and the abundance detector active all day. Letting real time pass between meals, with nothing in between, lets the balance tip back toward breaking down rather than building up. Movement helps through the same door. Physical activity raises AMPK, the energy shortage sensor, which is one of the levers a food pause pulls. A walk, especially before the first meal, leans the cell in the same direction. No fasting required to benefit from it. And then the warning, plainly. None of this is a medical instruction. Anyone with diabetes, anyone pregnant, anyone with a history of disordered eating, anyone on medication that depends on food timing should not improvise. That conversation belongs with a doctor, not a video. Fasting blindly, on the strength of a headline number, is the wrong move. What changes is honest only in rough terms. A nudge, repeated, in a direction the cell already knows. Step back, and the shape of this is familiar. A cell is not a static object slowly wearing out. It is a system that maintains itself, and it reads its environment to decide when to build and when to repair. For most of the body's history, that decision got made for it. Food came and went. The build signal rose and fell. The cleanup crew had its hours. The modern problem is not that the machinery broke. It is that one half of the cycle, the quiet half, has been nearly erased from the day. The fix, where there is one, is not exotic. It is the return of an absence, a stretch of hours with nothing coming in, so the building order can stand down and the recycling crew can run. Not a supplement to add, a signal to stop sending for a while. That is the through line under all the hype and the precise sounding numbers. The repair was never something you bought. It was something the cell did on its own, in the gaps, when the world stopped feeding it long enough to listen. The cell does not clean itself on a fixed schedule. It cleans itself in response to the silence between meals.